All right. The therapist's cultural identity can hinder psychotherapy. In what way?
Yeah.
This is
I was
something.
just thinking. Yeah.
This is something I wasn't even aware of until, maybe a few years. I'm not consciously aware of, right? And then, I started studying cultural diversity and, getting groups of that. And I started to realize, wow, it actually is an issue, right? And, I just wasn't consciously aware of it. So, I kind of agree with what they say here that, it's an unconscious thing.
Carry on, Steve.
I think before it becomes unconscious, it's so heavily reinforced in subtle ways and other ways that you develop a notion of colorblindness or other blindness. So what happens is by the time you come to the awareness, it's been so normalized. I carried a whole bunch of biases that I wasn't even aware until I chose to conscientize myself. And I said, I asked my professor one time, who do you see sitting in front of you? She said, a woman. I said, I'm not working with you. And I walked out. This was in university here, okay? As a way of, we teach each other, right? But sometimes we choose what is the easier path. I want to see different because I don't want to be associated with something that is historical and has nothing to do with you. And so you have to reflect on your own process because I come from a very privileged class background. And for me, at one point in my life, to say no quota systems for the Harijans of the scheduled class would have been very appropriate. Do I say that now? No. So it's a process where you're desensitized and you resensitize yourself and become a better person. A spiritual person. So welcome.
Sharon.
It's just a comment that I've also noticed. It's like even the children identify it. Like I'll just use an example. As we were at a social gathering at a restaurant, and the girls were out for a movie. So this boy was being babysat by us, and he was not older than 10 years old, but my friend beside me is Korean, and he's not Chinese, but this boy goes, "You're Chinese, aren't you?" He goes, "No, I'm not." And this boy was insisting, "No, you're Chinese, you are Chinese." And my male friend said, "No, I'm not." He wasn't going to say I'm Korean, but he goes, "I'm not Chinese." It's point blank. And it was very, very important for the boy to get it right because he was confused, but he wanted to make it an issue. So, "No, you are Chinese." And then he just highlighted feature. He goes, "I know you're Chinese because you have an accent, you have black hair, you have light colored skin, blah, 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 blah." My friend was really annoyed. If it wasn't a boy and he goes, I would have smacked him on the back of his head. Really good. So this child, and the male that was babysitting this boy, he just muttered to the boys, "You're way out of line." It's hard because it's not your child, and he was under 10, but it was already ingrained in this child. I thought he was, a well-behaved boy. I didn't witness this because suddenly he switched as soon as I showed up. So I was the only girl in this group, but he was when he was with the boys, he thought he could just let loose and be himself, but he was quite rude, and what we thought as adults was very out of line. So I don't.
That is sad, isn't
children.
it? Yeah, among children, especially among children. They don't have the sophistication of, the adults can rationalize and think. Yes, Steve.
Yeah, I think I was just going to speak to your point there that, there's a danger in oversensitizing yourself, right? And then I don't think that helps the situation either, right? Because, it could just be as simple as that child's only understanding of Asian was that all Asians are Chinese, right? It could have been something very simple like that. And kids are literal and honest, and they're like, no, you're Chinese, right? You know what I mean? It's not that, you're Chinese because of coming from a racial place. It's because this is how I see Asian people as being Chinese, period. So Like I said, to me, there's a danger in kind of swinging too far one way when we talk about, cultural diversity. Because I think then, we can end up, oversensitizing ourselves, and we can limit our ability to kind of interact with the client on a human level, right? Because I mean, that ultimately we want to reach people, right? And be able to connect with them.
And you miss the learning
That's
moment,
right.
teaching moment.
Yeah.
Because you're so like either trying to deal with being offended, or how should I take this, or are you kidding me? I get the same thing English, and the culture in my family was very different from my next door neighbors, but I think that we miss an opportunity to learn and share. And I think the other thing about kids, they're a really good mirror for how ridiculous adults can be sometimes. They give us back our stuff, don't they? And you go,
The exaggeration of what the adults have been impressing them, and also they talk about Chinese as a category. They didn't know that there's so many people look alike with so many different countries. So everybody's Chinese if you look like this. Yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say too that it's interesting because my dad is actually from St. Vincent in the Caribbean, and our family is very like I grew up on rice and peas and curry goat and the whole shebang. And people will say to me, "No, you're not," and I'm like, "No, I really did." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And then they'll test me. Okay, well, do you know what cuckoo is, or do you know what? So they'll start naming off foods that are, from the island. I'll say yes, and then I tell them the ingredients. And then they finally get to the question. It's like, well, how is that? Like, how come you know all these? And it's like, well, because, and I know they want to ask me, is my dad black?
Yeah.
The whole thing they want, this is all gearing up to, what color is your dad? So I
observed this
going
on,
right? Yeah. And it's funny because Marcia will say something to me like, whatever, how you doing today, or whatever, and then I'll say it back to her, and people go, what did you guys say? And it's like, and then they kind of, okay, so in terms of the banana, somebody said, you're kind of like a reverse Oreo cookie. They're like, well, you're actually white on the outside and black in the middle, like they reversed you, right? So I thought that was a really good example of kind of the reverse Oreo cookie, right?
Isn't that funny? What if I give you a piece of paper, ask you to draw yourself into a fruit, into a cookie, and I want to see what you would come up with. Wouldn't that be a good exercise?
Yeah.
Self-identity, right? Creativity and conceptualization. Hey, that would be a good exercise, don't you think, Josh?
Yeah.
Great exercise.
I have paper downstairs. That's what I'm going to give to everybody.
Well, I was asked once in an interview if I was a fruit, what sort of fruit would I be?
Really?
Yeah. And at first I'm thinking, okay, I am part of the LGBT community, but I don't think that's what you're asking. And then I went to, so then I thought, well, I got to be somewhat witty. And I thought, well, I'm going to stay away from banana because it's the phallic sort of thing. So then I thought, I know, I'll be a group player. So I said, well, I'm really grapes. And then kind of went this whole analogy, but I thought that was the weirdest question I ever got.
What animal would you be?
That's another thing.
By any chance European?
What's that?
The person who asked on that interview, by any chance was European?
You know what? I'm not sure.
Because it's very common.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. What fruit you would be?
HR went through a period of that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
Of trying to get you to. I don't know, because how did they interpret grapes?
I don't know either. Only the person who drew it can tell you. All right. And this is one thing about interpretation of art. Ask Teresa. Yes.
So I was gonna say to Lilian is that even with we're talking about, how can our cultural identity hinder psychotherapy, even within our own culture, right? And understanding what it is. For example, I'm Jamaican, and I'm actually partly Chinese Jamaican, right? So what does that mean for me? And I'm meeting another kid who's from here, whose parents are Jamaican. And to me, when I see the way they act, it's so not reflective of who we are.
That's right.
Right? So I think that and my own views of what being Jamaican is, like I need to kind of check in with myself to say, okay, what do I see? How do I see these wannabes? Sorry, that's how I see them. No, you're not really Jamaican. And it's not because you're not. It's just because, I think my generation is a little older than them and different.
Generation gap, individual differences. Yes.
Yeah. One thing, I remember, I don't know, 8 years ago when I started this particular job, the therapist who was working there before me, he was white, I'm black, and so he had a couple of clients who he was still seeing that he had to pass over to me, and there was this one girl who was a black girl from the Caribbean, starting to figure, oh, this one will be easy, kind of thing. And I remember she came into the room and she's like, oh, you're black? And she turns to the guy who was introducing us, and he's like, I do not want to see a black therapist. I know, so, I mean, how do you respond to that?
Yes.
But again, that's where wisdom came in. Honestly, that wasn't the act of God. But, I basically, I didn't react. I just engaged her, and I said, can we talk about that? Because there must be something. When she came back, when she had that perspective. Anyway, she saw it, I didn't get all, about it. And I really, we talked it through and everything. I mean, she turned out to be, I think you mentioned, like, one of my best clients ever, because her perception of other people from her community was, when it comes to mental health issues and how they saw her, was very negative. Yeah. And so she thought I would see her in that same way, right? And so it was and every time she always says to me, you're so different. I'm so glad that I, gave it a shot, because it was different. It was strange for me.
I'm sorry, that word different drives me crazy. I gotta say, it really does, because being a black person, to me, regardless of how much money I have, regardless of what my race is, regardless of my religion, I really just see us as people, right? So to say you see me as any different because I'm educated really rubs me the wrong way. Yeah. That's my own self-disclosure there. There are certain pieces about when especially white people say that to me, it irritates me, because you know what, I am a part of a black community. I don't think I'm any different, really. Maybe different from what you expect me to act like.
So our special identity could facilitate, but it could hinder.
Yes.
Yes.
And the most important thing is we know how to handle ourselves. That's what you did. Well done. Because you got her trust and started to work. You're not going to feel, oh, you kind of, look at my face, skin color, and there's a barrier. You just overcome that barrier because you are happy and you're satisfied with yourself. And that is what we need to, because we are all different. I'm sure if we have DNA for all of us, we all are mixed somehow, somewhere. I don't think anybody's pure. Okay? Yes.
Growing up in Windsor, being across in Detroit, when I was young, when I was a child, my father used to bring us downtown Windsor to look over at Detroit in one of the parking garages and watch the race riots. But I didn't know that's what it was. I just saw fires and stuff, and I thought, well, that's nice. Can we go home now? And it wasn't, like, I knew after it was the race riots and stuff, but I remember working with a black woman, and she started sharing with me, I was working in the States, she started sharing with me about her experience growing up during the race riots in downtown Detroit. And at that moment, it hit me. Oh my God. I was there watching this, and you actually experienced it. It was just a totally moving experience for me to have encountered this woman. was just amazing how it got me to change. Yeah.
You see the power of relationship, understanding, and experience. And when I saw this, and I got this paper, okay, and it is Awareness of White Privilege Among White Counseling Trainees by Ansins and Semensky. And, you know, most people are not aware that they have this privilege that they did not earn just because who they are, and they're not aware how other people feel about them, and it becomes a hindrance. So with either your client's white or the counselor's white, and they need to be aware of some of these things that they didn't ask for. And this is a good paper.
I just want to make a comment that in order for relationships to evolve, the tool that we use is language. And the politics of language, they either create a disempowered context in any relationship, including therapeutic relationship, or an empowered context. So we say language is not neutral, right? So, and it could be our work also, in our work we say 90% is non-verbal. So both of them have to be congruent, but we have to be very critical, because even as Ollie was saying about the word fruit, it has a very different meaning. People need to really think who's coming to the table, which words are problematic, and actually I've gone to interviews like that where I, in the middle, decided I don't want to come to this organization. Because if this is how you're going to begin with me, I'm not going to come in here, because we spend our lives educating people. Because it's the wretched of the earth is always educating the other. So having said that, that's what I do in my work, but I'm just saying it's just to be very cognizant of the language in stated and unstated ways, if our role is to create relationships that are empowering. And in this stage and time, we no longer can say that we are not aware.
Thank you. Okay. All right, and we'll pass our break time. I'll just wrap up with this. The therapist's responsibilities, so that you could think about it. And it said, we need to recognize that everyone is a product of cultures, and we are cultural animals. We may unconsciously discriminate against people who are different from us. We often deny that we are bigoted and may be unaware of our biases. And we need to exercise self-reflection to examine our own racial identity. So the exercise would be to draw something that represents you. You could be animal, you could be cookies, you could be a house, you could be anything. Downstairs later. Is that okay? And you could think. Now, I have a couple of announcements. And this is inventory of self. So I will hand it out to you, and for those partners on the webcam, I'm going to email it to you by attachment, and you take time to think. You say, personal trait, my attractive characteristics, my unattractive characteristics. Do I have an attitude towards psychotherapy? Self, towards clients? Do I have any personal issues? Family secrets, personal secrets, hot buttons, emotional issues, area of personal life or practice that may benefit from personal therapy. And then personal knowledge, of course, blind spots and what have you. Have you ever mismanaged transference? What are your biases and jealousies and prejudices? Are you afraid of self-disclosure? And then what are your future plans? So this will wrap up everything that we have said the last 2 days, and we're going to do more the next weekend. But in the meantime, I want you to get started. Some of my previous students said, it took me 4 hours. I said, good. That is cleansing, that's reflection, that is growth. Do it, And then if you got it all done next weekend and you say, I'm going to change something, then you could. And I don't ask this back until the course is finished. I'm going to give you 2 weeks after that to hand it in before we give you your certificate. Is that okay? Any questions? All right. And you have 20 minutes until 3 o'clock. Is that okay? And stretch and do exercises, get music. I don't care. Just be comfortable.
Yeah.